This is just one of those things to me, just think about how much fun that is. And I'm not normally nervous. I'm not a normally nervous person, even when it comes to speaking in front of people. But tomorrow I speak in front of the governor of Missouri, the great state of Missouri, which is a very different situation because not only is the governor there, but my father, bankers, suppliers, venture capitalists, all those kinds of people are there. Like it's a whole different thing. It'll be quite exciting. So that just to say there's a lot going on. And when there's a lot going on, there's a lot of pressure, and I understand those things. My teachings this year, what I've taught on, have been topical in nature. And the topics are to express who God is. What I've tried to share with you were foundations that say, here's who God was, to explain why we believe what we as a church believe. I wanted to lay foundations in those fundamentals. And so we talked about things like this. Why do we even believe that there's a God? Remember that one? Then we talked about who Satan is. Because you can say, well, who's God? But if you don't have an understanding of, well, who is Satan? How are you going to understand it? How are you going to understand what we as people in the world are up against? We talked about the godly roles of men. And of course, they needed it first. And we waited a while and we talked about the godly roles of women and how that all fits together. And we talked a lot, and I've talked a lot. It's one of my favorite subjects. How do we culturally fit into the world as a church? And all those topics are fantastic, I think. And they're intended to help us understand who God is and who we are in relation to His will, and who disciples are to be as a light, His light, to a broken world. And so, what are we intended to do? The truth is, we are called to overcome. We are called to persevere. And if you don't understand that concept, and we're going to talk about that today, to not understand it, well, I think it puts you at a disadvantage. And I think also to come back and say that this is a very personal subject. Every one of you is persevering through something completely different than the one next to you. You have a different mindset. You've been raised and created differently. You understand and see the world differently, and that's not wrong. God put a group of 12 together, Jesus did, and they were everything from a zealot to a tax collector. Those are two people who shouldn't have been in the same room. And so here we are, sometimes people who, if you just say, hey, I'm this kind of person, well, you shouldn't be in a room with that kind of person unless you're saying, hey, we have to make a complete whole as one, where it takes all different types of personalities and people to make that happen. So the sermon and what we're going to talk about today, this topic, it began months ago. Though some of you are going to say, and you're going to think because of conversations we've had over short periods of time, that, man, this one's for me. And that maybe I had you in mind. And I didn't necessarily. But over time, I've had conversations where I thought, well, this is going to point right to that. And here's the truth of it all. This one's for me. And it's for me because I titled it In the Blink of an Eye. When something completely unexpected happens and changes your life, what do you do? So I'm going to give you some quick stories here, and they're going to ramp up in intensity. And these are all from people that I know, and they're all from people that I know personally, and some of you may sit in the room and some of you don't. So that'll leave you guessing. But if parts of them are about you, you'll know what I'm talking about. But simply it's to come back to say, how do we handle things that just change in a moment's notice, or our world, what we thought the way things were going to be, now they're not ever going to be like that again. And those happen in positive ways, but the ones you remember are the ones that happened in negative ways. They're the ones that impact your soul at a deeper level. And so, ramping up in intensity, I'll just use a very recent one from my own, very simple, right? I'm out mowing my yard. And we have a hill behind our pond. Imagine this kind of hillside. And it's weed laden, and twice a year we're supposed to mow it down. And I got the mower and I'm going like heck. I'm having a good time. Everything's great. All of a sudden I look behind me and there are flames. Like everything behind me is on fire. And immediately I think, we're going to burn everything because the wind is blowing and it's blowing this direction and that's toward other houses. And I freak out, I jump off the mower, run over the hill and look, and luckily the hill behind that is where that fire would go is an empty field. Because if it had been another field of weeds, that fire would have just gone like crazy because it was massive, unbelievable what it had taken off into in just a short period of time. I'm just mowing along having fun, all of a sudden there it is. Next step of intensity. Why I titled it In the Blink of an Eye and where it came from. You all know my history, some of you do. If you don't, I'll give you a short brief of it. I have raced my entire life, street raced and goofed around, right? And then ended up on this TV show about street racing on Discovery Channel for 6 years, and all that is fun. And we chase this title. We chase a championship, right? And last year, we're on the verge of that. I'm ahead. We're leading the season. We're winning. We're going to dominate it. Everything's good. We're rounds ahead. We're at the finals, and I red light. In the blink of an eye, what I had chased for my entire life and would have been very important to me and really mattered, I thought, I missed by. And who knows, was it milliseconds? Possibly. Was I just too fast? Did my brain let go early? I don't know. I still can't explain it to this day. But what seemed certain and what was going to happen and what was so, like we're on the top of this, suddenly wasn't. Blink of an eye. So the sermon is about me. But it can be about you too. I have a buddy who went in for an annual review. Everything was great. My world is good. My business is good. I'm going to have my annual review. This is going to go great. That's not what he heard. In fact, he heard something incredibly different, which changed his view of what am I doing here? How does this work? And it just upends everything, right? Well, let's take something really serious. My little brother. And some of you have met him and some of you haven't. And someday he'll be here for you to experience time with him. And he's an acquired taste. My little brother. And I love him to death. But he's 12 years old. Now, when I was a kid, I can tell you what I did every 4th of July from the time I was 10 years old till I was 17. Because 4th of July was just a lot of fun for us. My family's from a little town in western Kansas. We spent way too much on fireworks for a bunch of poor people. Like we turned 4th of July into something unreal. And it was always unreal. And we'd have these big gatherings and it was always a lot of fun. It was a blast and, it was just great. But you'd have these fireworks ahead of time. We'd play with them and stuff. No big deal. My little brother's by himself. Everybody's gone. He walks out into the backyard. He grabs a handful of Roman candles, walks out into the backyard. He's lighting them off. He takes one out. He's moving pretty quickly because he's having a great time. Lights one, holds it out. Doesn't go off. So he looks to see if it's still lit. Talk about a life changed forever. Years of surgery. Years of the conviction of trouble. Sorry. And you just see him, this happy-go-lucky kid, now is a very different person. What a change. Changed my family from my father. He finds Jason. He's driving back to the house. He sees him running down the street and he doesn't know why. Doesn't listen to him when he tries to stop him. He has to basically tackle him and take him to the hospital. This is a very intense moment. A life that changed forever. And when you meet him, you'll see it. Years of surgery just to make his face look normal, somewhat. And what an intense thing to happen. And you think, man, how do you top that? Well, a few years ago, I met a guy who had owned a construction company. And he did, basic dirt moving and stuff like that. And he is running a machine with his son. And the movement of the machine cost his son his life. It's the father who's the operator. And you just wonder, how could you ever recover? How could your life ever recover from something like that? And look, sometimes forgiveness includes forgiving ourselves. I find it easier to forgive others than myself. Like, I know the mistakes I've made. I know the problems I created. I feel them. And it is very difficult to deal with things when you are emotionally attached to it, or when it's going to impact the rest of your life. You can't hide it, you can't lose it, you can't do away with it. Like, these things are just incredibly difficult to deal with. And the longer you're going to carry it is how close it is to your heart, or how close it is to the life changing. And sometimes that event, it's just completely unexpected, or it's completely out of character. When it comes from someone you did not expect it to come from, and you can all think of something you probably are in your brain that you're going, I've experienced something like that. Maybe not to that level. Those are incredibly intense levels that aren't that common. But you've dealt with something. You've had moments where I should have done something different, and my life would be different if I had. How do you deal with them? Maybe something was untrue. There's a constant theme in the Bible. One consistent principle. And it is simply this. It comes down to two words: perseverance and overcome. There will always be things we have to persevere through. There will always be a challenge in front of you. You must overcome. How do we put our faith in a place to do that? I always say, proverb, and it comes from our Proverbs, fall down 7, get up 8. And it's fitting that this week, George Foreman passed, who was also a preacher. And I'm going to give you, here's a quote. When I was a boxer in the 70s, I was hit in the face by Joe Frazier, knocked out by Muhammad Ali, and knocked down a couple of times by Ron Lyle before I got up and won. All of the fights had one thing in common. When they were over, I could hardly remember the pain. I forgot my weak knees, the cuts, the blood in my eyes. If not for the films of my fights, I would have put them totally out of my mind. It's the same when you hit rough times. Don't let the pain and disappointment lodge inside. That's incredibly insightful. How do you not let things stick? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take you on a very quick walk. Something of an overview of a life that experienced all of these things and rose above them. I know you're trying to guess. It's Joseph. Rachel is the mother of Joseph and of Benjamin. They're birthed in old age, which we see time and time again led to someone great. Like the Old Testament, when you read someone who is birthing a child very late, beyond the age of expectation, it's going to bring about someone great. Samuel comes out of this. Isaac, Jacob, who was Joseph's father. John the Baptist. These are all people from someone beyond the age, and you'd say, well, what's the big deal? It's a far more miraculous birth to people than a virgin birth. Like, well, how's that possible? Because a virgin birth can't be. Because if you're an outsider, if someone said, man, I'm having a child like Mary telling people, I'm having a child and I'm a virgin, would you believe her? You would have simply said, you're just not a virgin. Super easy, right? Like, I know that. But someone who's 80 having a child, you're like, oh, that's barren. That's completely miraculous. It can't be argued. So many miraculous correlations come out of this. And I'm not going to talk about them all because it would take like sermon after sermon to cover all of these topics. But I want to tell you some miraculous correlations of Joseph to Jesus. Just real quick. Judah comes up with selling Joseph for silver coins. Judas, named after Joseph, or named after Judah, sells Jesus for silver coins. Judas sells him for silver coins. Judah asks to exchange places with Benjamin. Judah asks to exchange Jesus from the line of Judah. Jesus exchanges his life for yours. His accusers, the accusers of Jesus, buy a field with the silver coins. The field where Joseph is laid was bought with silver coins when they're there in Shechem. Okay, those are just quick things. Grab your Bible and go to Genesis 37. And we're going to skim quickly through the story of Joseph. And look, it's not because, it's only for the sake of time that we're going to do this. So I'm going to bounce through scriptural pieces, and if you keep up sliding through it, you can look at it. Or if you just want to listen, you're welcome to do so. I don't know how fast you are with the Bible. That's all up to you. Genesis 37. That's where we'll start. Let me get my laptop right. Give you a moment to find it. Verse 2. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Okay, 17-year-old young man, also a tattletale. Here he is, bringing his dad bad news about his brothers. He's already off to a bad start. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph. Now, that's Jacob's name. Jacob was renamed because Jacob means the deceiver. He's renamed Israel. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him. They could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Not only is he a tattletale, he's a bragger. He's like too much. He's done aggravated his brothers. If you drop down to 12, now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. Long story about Shechem we'll get to at the end. Drop down to 18. Middle of 17. Actually, so Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer. They said to each other, come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns, these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Joseph. 26. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. Judah steps up. It's why you see later everyone is removed, and it's an interesting concept to think about how this is in the Jewish works. Judah becomes the patriarch. He becomes the one who the others drop off because of things that they do. It's an interesting concept. Judah rises up and said, no, let's not kill him. Let's do something different. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. A couple things here. Joseph is his father's favorite son. He's 17 years old. He's got the world by the hand. His father makes him this fancy robe, anoints him, like all this stuff. He just loves him, overwhelms him. He gets these dreams from God. He knows that God speaks to him. He tells it to his brothers. He probably thinks he's just doing the right thing, and instead he's aggravating them. And here he is, told to go check on his brothers who are tending the flocks. And when he arrives, they want to kill him. They throw him in a well. In the blink of an eye, Joseph's entire life changes. I am my father's son. I am in charge. I am like super God has me by the grace. No. I'm sold to Egypt as a slave. Egypt in this case, always in the Old Testament, represents the world. The worldly thinking, the worldly ways. The Israelites represent us, if you look at it in that way, of how we struggle and wrestle with God like they did. He's sent to Egypt. 36. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. He gets lucky. He's sold into slavery, if you want to call that luck. Go to 39, chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Joseph's brothers, in the blink of an eye, changed his life. He's sold into slavery. Does he sit around and whine about it? He rises up. He takes the next opportunity that he's given. He uses the talents that God has loaded him with. And he administers, manages the house of the person that he's sold to, and rises to be in charge of everything. He's back in the catbird seat. Everything is great. My life is awesome. Joseph has everything figured out. He thought would be destroyed in a well. Now he's here. He's managing the household of this very wealthy official who leads, and he's got it all again. Verse 6, so Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. I wonder why his brothers were so jealous of him. Not only did he have dreams from God, all this stuff that they didn't have, had their father's blessing. I mean, he was a good-looking dude. Well, that comes to trouble, doesn't it? 19, when his master heard the story, his wife told him. What story did she tell him? Your man Joseph tried to rape me. What was true? Well, she had tried to bed him, and he always said no. But one time she gets him, and when he runs off, she's still holding his cloak. Think about the story of the cloak. Here he was thrown into the well with the cloak, which they coated with blood to say this is where he went away. Now again, the cloak is trouble. Joseph is falsely accused. Everything is great, and in the blink of an eye, his world changes again. Falsely accused. This is how your slave treated me, his wife says. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, drop down to 23, the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Once again, he makes something great happen. He stays. I wonder if he grew from the first challenge, maybe. I don't know. Here he is tossed into prison, wrongfully accused. How would you have done such a thing? How could you have accepted such a thing? Here he was in a position where his family had turned on him before. Now he's wrongfully accused, placed in prison. So, in prison, over time, the cupbearer, I don't remember who the other guy was that are in prison, from Pharaoh's court, have dreams. And they ask around about interpretation. Here's Joseph. Oh, I'll tell you about those. So he interprets the dreams of the two people. Both of the dreams come perfectly true. The cupbearer and the other say, we will remember you. They don't. 23. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. 41. When 2 full years had passed, for 2 years after he interprets the dream and the cupbearer is out, Joseph is still in prison, stuck. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile. Drop down to 16. Because the cupbearer now remembers him. Calls Joseph up out of prison. Joseph comes to, first they clean him up. Imagine he's been in prison. I don't know if he's unshaven, unkempt, maybe unclean. I don't know. But they bring him up to meet Pharaoh, wash him up, get him in front of Pharaoh. When he's there, Pharaoh says, can you interpret my dream? Joseph says something incredibly interesting in verse 16. I will go to 15. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said that of you, that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Well, Joseph gives credit where it's due. Joseph doesn't have to be reminded of where his power or authority or all of his passions and the way that he's created and the things that he's really good at, where did they come from? He knows. So he tells Pharaoh, I can't, but God can. And he interprets the dream. And through interpreting the dream, he's put in charge of everything. He's put in charge of all Pharaoh's stuff. Not only that, but he's in charge of making sure that they use the 7 years of plenty coming out of the Nile, which also has, if you want to go into it, correlations to Moses. 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of incredible drought are coming. He tells Pharaoh this. He's put in charge of everything. He runs the whole country. He gathers all of this grain, all this stuff together in their 7 years of plenty to prepare for the 7 years. Now, if you interpret a dream and everything goes well, and for 7 years things are flying along, don't you still wonder every time it doesn't rain, like, okay, now is it going to turn? But Joseph stays true. He understands what God has asked of him. Go to Genesis 42. Because things happen. As they've gathered it up and now the drought begins. Genesis 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob is the father of Joseph, also known as Israel. He said to his sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? Like, you should be doing something about this. He continued, I have heard that there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. Verse 6 and 42. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold the grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from, he asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. First time he's seen his brothers. The ones who had thrown him into a well, sold him into slavery. He speaks unkindly to them. But does he do what maybe you or I would have done? The retribution? No. How does he handle it? It goes on in a long story. He handles it in ways that remind them of things without fully. It's kind of like prophecy. Puts silver in their purse, in their bags. He does some things like that. Brings about their nature where they have to come back. He's, I'm sure, stunned that they actually have arrived. Now, if we go to Genesis 44, verse 33. Now we see an interesting thing that happens through all of these transactions. Again, I'm making a very quick run through this for a very pointed reason. 33. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. So the brothers have come, but Benjamin has not. His younger brother from the same mother. Joseph now asks for Benjamin to be left, and they can go. Again, here Judah says, I will exchange myself for him. He ends up giving them grain, saving them. They still don't know who he is. 20 years has passed, we'll go into that in a minute. Verse 4 of Genesis 45. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Verse 14, then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept, and Benjamin embraced him, weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards his brothers talked with him. Could you have been this forgiving of someone who had sold you into slavery and cast you in a well? Look, your family will do you wrong. Your church family will do you wrong. If you know anyone more than a short period of time, if you become very close to anyone, they will do you wrong. Or they may not treat you the way you should have been or expect to have been or all that kind of stuff. I get it. How do you handle it? Do you let it cause you to stay inside of yourself? Do you let it cause you to become unproductive because all you worry about is what happened to you? Or are you able to slough it off? Realize that people are broken. That something good can come of it. I always tell my little brother, you have a place and the ability to teach something I cannot, in a way that very few others can, if you just take that and run with it in the right way. Imagine the things in your life that you could talk about, that you could teach about, that you could help others with. If you decided that that's what it was meant for. This is what Joseph says. This wasn't meant for evil. This was meant for good. It was evil that had happened. He forgave them. I recognize now, Joseph says, that something good is meant to come of this. That we will save many. And saving many, look, you can look in the New Testament and all that. When it says your life will be saved, it is not talking about this life. It is not. We talk and have conversations a lot about what could be the worst thing that would ever happen. And I'll tell you what it is. If you don't remember, if you're new, to be in heaven without your children, without your grandchildren, whatever. To teach and to grow others, to help others find their way is our role, even when bad things have happened to us. How do you take what is hard and has happened to you, again, and instead of making it what you console everyone else about or whatever, make it what you teach and grow people out of? How do we do that? That's a real challenge. Whoops. Let's go on. 46, verse 2. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, Jacob, Jacob. Here I am, he replied. I am God, the God of your father. He said, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. He means at the end of his life. Drop down to 34. You should answer, your servants have tended livestock from our boyhood on, just as our fathers did. Then you will be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen, for all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. This is prophecy. Jesus would come as the shepherd. We just talked about that. The world is always signified through the stories of Egypt. And we are signified, if you want to look at it and understand, from the stories of Israel. Our failings are shown. But shepherds are detestable. 47. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh in verse 10. And went out from his presence. Jacob blesses Pharaoh. Do you bless your enemies and not curse? Well, that's a for sure principle of Jesus, isn't it? Very difficult to do. Could you take care of those who had tried to kill you? And this is the story of Joseph in this fantastic way in which he handles struggle. Verse 20. So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's. Here's how Pharaoh takes over the entirety of all Egypt through the shrewdness of Joseph. Drop down to 30. But when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried. I will do as you say, he said. 49, sorry. Verse 10. The scepter will not depart from Judah. Now is prophecy. Nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until he whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of his nation shall be his. The prophecy of Jesus coming out of the line of Judah is established as the 12 brothers become the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's an incredible story to think about. They grow up under the captivity in Egypt. The 12 tribes become the 12 tribes, not on their own, but under the oppression of the world. And they're told, hey, the scepter. We don't understand that today. If I said scepter, you're like, what is that? It's the staff of power that kings used to have. It signified ruling authority. Will not depart from Judah. Well, it does. Judah dies. Judah never even becomes king. But his offspring, Jesus, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until whom it belongs shall come. What a fantastic prophecy. 50, verse 19. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? That's a question mark. He is not. You intended it to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to all of those. Drop down to 24. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, But God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. That's intense. It's a lot of scripture to carry. I understand that. I'm going to say some things real quickly. You just heard that. Carry my bones up from this place. I'm going to read Exodus 13:19. This is the verse. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones with you from this place. 430 years there in slavery. And when they exit Egypt, they carry the bones of Joseph with them. Joseph, who had saved them by being a forgiving person, by being someone who did not repay an arm for an arm or an eye for an eye. Joshua 24. And Joseph's bones, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, now were generations later. Moses has passed. Joshua is now in charge. Joseph's bones, which Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem, in the tract of land that Jacob bought for 100 pieces of silver from the sons of Hamor. What an incredibly dark story. Exactly as Jesus was sold for the silver coins, and the Pharisees, when Judas returns them, takes the silver coins and buy a field. So was a field bought back then, Shechem. This is where Shechem rapes the sister of the brothers. Eventually, the father Jacob buys the field. The brothers rise up, slaughter Shechem and his family. This is where Joseph is buried, in the same place where the silver coins again buy the field, representing what same thing happens to Jesus. And the darkness behind that. 430 years the Israelites are a slave in Egypt. About 600 years between Joseph sold into slavery and his bones buried in Shechem. There is 13 years between his 17-year-old and when he goes to Pharaoh and interprets the dream. For 13 years he is into slavery, into prison. Each time he rises up, for he's finally remembered again. I can't wait 13 days for things to happen. Joseph perseveres for 13 years. Later, he takes care of all of Egypt, or all of his family into Egypt. And then the story goes in the start of Exodus that the new pharaohs come on and they don't remember any of that. And so they begin oppression. And you say, well, that's not fair. It's not. It's kind of life, though. It's life still the same today. So what can you learn? Perseverance, when it's happening, feels like forever. When you're in a time of perseverance, it's long, it's hard, it's arduous. Persevere anyway. And watch yourself grow. This is what the Bible calls you to. How do you get strong? Lifting weight. How do you get strong in character? By overcoming. Joseph, he was a whiny little tattletale. We saw that. Who didn't know how to even deal with his brothers. Like, man, I'm going to be the king of you. I can tell you about this dream I got. Right? How many of those things had to happen to him to learn lessons? To be prepared to be Pharaoh's right-hand person who would administer and do the things that he did for God? We say, well, I don't know why God's got me going through this. You're learning something. You're being challenged. How will you respond? God, how did he raise Joseph up? He put him through all of these challenges. That's not fair. That's not fun. Well, it doesn't matter. In the end, he is strong and prepared. He has learned massive lessons. And by the way, he remains forgiving. So you either watch and grow or you remain a slave to your own misery. You will revel in it and drag others into it with you and just talk about that. Or you will rise up. And you will teach others to overcome the struggle. Perhaps God meant the struggle to be used for good. Perhaps he means for you to overcome and come through that struggle so that when you are through it, you can teach others to do the same. All of this is understanding how forgiveness is so fundamental to God's will. We seek it. How easily do you give it? You ever pray for forgiveness? I'm sure you have. How many times do you think about giving it away? You're asking for it. Use the lesson God puts you through. Use the talents God gave you for growing others. And you cannot do any of this when you are bitter. Struggles, they will either make you bitter or they will make you better. And that choice is yours. The decision looks like this. Will I look internally and revel in my misery, or will I look out for others to help, to teach? The answer is simply these two. Selfishness versus selflessness. Well, I say this about marriage. Marriage is right when each partner looks at it and says, I'm going to be selfless. I will be about the other. Because that is how we're intended to be in God's grace together. It's also completely mimics how we're supposed to be in life in submission to God. Together. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you so much for great lessons. Man, are they hard to hear. Man, are they hard to read. And sometimes I struggle to understand them. It takes years sometimes to figure out, what are you trying to tell me? God, I just pray that you will help us grow each other, that we will grow together, that we will look at life and we will look at struggles and overcome them in the way that you overcame the world. That we will overcome them together in ways that can make us great disciples for you to impact a broken world. The Israelites were sent into Egypt representing a broken world, and they came out of it with the help of the Holy Spirit, with the guidance that you gave them. And God, we just pray the same for us, that we learn to overcome the world and help others do the same, that we don't look at ourselves as the answer or really the problem, but we look at what can we do and how should we handle it and what would you ask of us. God, we pray for your love and your grace.